Greetings, Dr. Mark Winton here from the Department of Criminal Justice at the University of Central Florida, located in beautiful Orlando, Florida. And what I'd like to do in this video is talk a little bit about serial killers in film. And I'll be relying primarily on an excellent article by Dr. Call, published in 2019, titled Serial Entertainment, a content analysis of 35 years of serial murder in film, in the journal Homicide Studies, volume 23, issue 4, pages 362 to 380. Homicide Studies is an excellent resource, and if you're in the field of homicide studies, this is definitely a journal to have access to. I'll also be thinking about the extensive research presented in Dr. Hickey's book, Serial Murders and Their Victims. This is a book that we use in my serial murder class. And for those of you who are in the class, hello and welcome. And those of you who just have an interest in watching the video, I welcome you to the YouTube channel. So there's a very strong interest in serial murder, even though it's relatively rare. It's a rare occurrence. And we know there's thousands of arrests made each year for robberies, rapes, assaults, and homicides, but we don't hear that much about arrests for serial murder. It is estimated that there are between 35 to 100 active serial killers in any given year in the United States. And there's also a lot of debate over the definition of serial murder. And of course, this makes it difficult for comparative analysis. You know, if we're doing comparative analysis, we probably want to use the same definition. And the FBI has a definition that many use, and that is that serial murder is the killing of two or more victims by the same offender or offenders in separate events. So what's real important there is killing two people, at least two people, but there's a cooling off period. So they're separate events. So if someone walked into a business and shot and killed 6 people, that would not be serial murder. So there, you start talking about mass murder. And so there's differences, and that's important, as we've learned in the first chapter in the textbook. And there's different definitions. Some are more specific, so people, researchers expand and contract that definition, and that's important for the research. There's also a lot of myths surrounding serial killers. For example, that they're all males, they're all white, they're all mentally ill, they all have a high IQ, they're all loners, they're all motivated by sexual impulses, and they all want to be caught. Those are all myths that we'll see as we progress in this video. So it's important to remember, and Dr. Call points that out, that movies about serial killers are created primarily for entertainment purposes. And some may believe that these films reflect research findings, and we'll find out in some cases there's some consistency, in other cases there's not. But this also may lead to distorted views of police investigations and the criminal justice system in general. And with this interest, we've seen an increase in more and more serial murder films. And this probably will continue in that pattern. And so we get impressions of the serial murder script, the who, what, where, when, why, and how from these films. Well, Dr. Call used content analysis of serial murder films that were sampled from 1980 to 2015 using the Internet Movie Database. Dr. Call selected only fictional-based serial killers and randomly selected from 503 films 50. So Dr. Call, watching a lot of films, 50. 503, that's a real lot of films to be watching. 50 is a good, strong sample there to have. And of course, if you were interested, you could randomly select from that and analyze films. You could analyze a few films. You could analyze as many as you want. replicate the study, use some different films, and you can get the actual films that Dr. Hall used in the article. So what do the films get wrong? Well, in the serial killer films that Dr. Hall analyzed, all the serial killers were white. And that's not accurate based on the research. Also, in the films, 1/4 of the serial killers did not have a cooling off period. So that means they weren't even serial killers, using the FBI definition, and other standard definitions include always, this cooling off period. So you may have had mass murders included as a serial killer film. Also, the films tended to show a larger proportion of serial killers who were motivated by revenge and then just snap. That something just really angers them, and boom, they just snap and kill. We know in the reality that serial killers plan out other killings over relatively lengthy periods of time. And then they, in films, serial killers were killed by the intended victim or police. But in reality, serial killers are more likely to, when they're arrested, to receive a prison sentence that may or may not include execution. But we don't have intended victims and police going around, killing serial killers. Also, what films get wrong regarding victims, in the films that were sampled, the victims were more likely to be male, but the research shows that victims are more likely to be female. And also in the films, there was a higher percentage of white victims, and a majority of the victims in the films were stabbed or cut, but research shows that victims are more likely to be shot. But films also get some things right that are more consistent with the research findings. That, for example, the portrayal of women are more accurate. They point out in films and also in the research that a majority of serial killers killed locally, so they're geographically in one particular area. Also, the age of the victims tended to be more consistent in the films and the research, and also pointing out the majority of serial killers are strangers rather than knowing the victim. And so those are some things that the films get right. And so I think that's real important and relevant to start thinking about the films that we see and how that relates to what we know in the research, and what is portrayed accurately and what is inaccurate in the films. And of course, some films are influenced by particular cases, and we always have to remember, again, these films are produced primarily for entertainment. That's a whole nother issue, right? We're not going to get into. But the interest in serial murder is clearly there. For example, for a number of years now, I've been teaching a serial murder course at the university every semester, so 3 times a year basically. And I usually have around anywhere from 150 to 225 students each semester. So I tend to have a lot of students. There's a lot of interest. Now, a lot of that is because that's part of our criminal profiling certificate, and so that might generate a lot of interest. People getting their students getting their criminal profiling certificates or their crime scene investigation certificates. Take the course. But there's a general interest in public as well. I mean, certainly, if you're one of the students in the class, or you read books about this, if you're sitting down at a coffee shop and you're reading Serial Murders and Their Victims by Dr. Hickey, people may ask you, oh wow, why are you reading that book? What's going on with that? You taking a course or you're teaching? people just have an interest about it, or they might just say, I don't really want to talk to that person. I don't know. So people, interpret it very, very differently. I know when I've been out public reading my books, people talk to me all the time about what I'm reading, ask me about it, and tell me about cases they've heard about or read about, and what I think about certain cases. And so there's a lot of interest. All right. I'm going to wrap this video up because this is about the 5th or 6th time, and I've made it much shorter, but also there aren't all those mistakes that occurred earlier. So I'm going to wrap this up and say thank you very much.